Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudilla lah wa may yudlil fala hadiya lah. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu rasuluh. Amma ba'd. All the praise is due to Allah alone. We seek Allah's help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our souls and bad deeds. Whom Allah guides will never be led astray, and whoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God, no deity, but Allah, the one who has no partners, and I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad S.A.L.A.M is his final slave and messenger. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who have believed in Allah, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in submission to Allah. Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisaa. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَيْكُمْ رَقِيبًا. O people, be dutiful to your Lord who created you from one soul and created from it its mate and dispersed from both many men and women. And fear Allah through whom you demand mutual rights and revere the wombs that bore you. Indeed, Allah is ever over you, Ar-Raqib, an observer. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. O you who have believed in and fear Allah, speak words of appropriate justice. Allah will then amend for you your deeds and forgive you for your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and Allah's messenger has attained the most excellent attainment. So tonight, we know that we are in the month of Rajab, the month of Allah. I remind myself and you, I hope you have been honoring Allah with your behavior. I hope you have been in this sacred month avoiding any fighting in your home, any quarreling in your home, or anything like that. So tonight's subject is Rajab, Sha'ban, and Ramadan in particular are the gift of interruption. Whoever thought of interruption as a gift? Liberation of the soul and nourishment for the heart. When we get consumed by daily life, the dunya, daily routines, getting the kids to school, picking up the kids from extracurricular activities, being old and going to lots of doctor's appointments, different things. Of course, I know nothing about that at this point in life. But these worldly attachments come with a risk that it becomes a cycle of dependency. We depend on all of these things, and we think that that's what living in the world is all about. When consumed by daily routines and worldly attachments, we are prone to become prisoners of our habits. Well, this is what I do every day. This is what I have to do. I don't have a choice. I have to do this. So we become prisoners of our habits, our desires, and our impulses. In Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's infinite mercy, Allah Azza wa Jal interrupts this cycle 5 times daily through prayer. The sad part is that a very small percent of Muslims actually pray 5 times a day. But Allah designed it as an interruption, a positive kind of interruption. By stepping away from the mundane, we are trained to focus on the eternal and realign our hearts with our Creator. Similarly, fasting during Ramadan and on recommended days throughout the year frees us from our attachments. Our attachment to have lunch with the boys or lunch with the girls, or to go out with the guys and to the hookah lounge or wherever people do, whatever people do. So Ramadan comes along as this beautiful interrupter. And it frees us from these attachments, even the attachments of food and drink. I have to have my coffee at 10 in the morning or I'll die. I have to have my 4 o'clock tea. And all of a sudden, those interruptions by Allah's mercy and grace are interrupted. Those addictions. This interruption, I want you to hear this, my beloved brothers. It's why I use the word liberation of the soul in the halaqah tonight. This interruption is not a burden. It is very heartbreaking to me. But I have had so many Muslims to tell me that Ramadan is a burden. Yeah. And that means that you need to do da'wah to that Muslim. You need to teach that Muslim the beauty of this divine interruption. Rajab, the month of Allah, Sha'ban, the month of Rasulullah ﷺ, and Ramadan, the month of the community, is a cure for the heart's ailments. It's like detoxing. It's like going into a detox facility. And by the way, most people who go into drug detox, they only get 30 days, insurance-wise. Allah gives us 30 days to detox from our phones at night, from this thing right here at night, and says rather go to the masjid and worship. Have a liberating interruption that will change your life. In its spiritual sense, the heart is the seat of our connection to Allah Azza wa Jal. When consumed by worldly pursuits, when my heart is leaning to that beautiful man or woman, according to what you're looking at, when my heart is moved by that very expensive suit, the heart begins to die. It actually gets weighed down and suffocated by greed, arrogance, pride, and other spiritual ailments. So fasting and prayer are a detox, purifying the heart and restoring its capacity to experience divine peace. There are so many Muslims anesthetizing their pain today. It is more common to go to a so-called Muslim wedding today and see alcohol served than it is to go to a Muslim wedding where alcohol is not served. How many people know about that? Yeah. So we need detox. We need liberation from these worldly attachments. In Surah Ash-Shams, Surah 91, verses 7 through 10, beautifully encapsulates this journey. Consider the human self and how it is formed in accordance with what it is meant to be and imbued with moral failings as well as the consciousness of God. Truly successful is the one who purifies it, and truly lost is the one who corrupts it. The world will corrupt it, and the Quran will fix it. Through fasting, we pause to ask, what am I feeding the soul? So in the month of Allah, have you been feeding your soul something different? Have you decided to take a different kind of diet? To try some different kind of spiritual food? Reading the Quran a little more, having a heavier diet in reading, a heavier diet in making dhikr, a heavier diet in making nafil, supererogatory prayers. These months, and Ramadan in particular, are for realizing our spiritual dimension, not the worldly dimension. We are more than just physical beings. Dreams, thoughts, emotions, and moral inclinations point to a reality beyond material. While the physical body thrives on food, sleep, and rest, the soul requires its sustenance. And what is that? What is that sustenance? A connection with Allah, which would be through the Quran or through prayer. That's the food we're looking for. Educational systems and societal norms often focus solely on the physical realm, promoting philosophies of materialism and humanism. Yet as Muslims, we are reminded that true fulfillment comes from nurturing the soul, nurturing the fitrah. This nourishment cannot be achieved through material means, but through acts of worship, remembering Allah and surrendering to Allah. Oh, I thought about praying, but I didn't. I remembered, but then I didn't implement what I remembered. I didn't follow through on what I remembered. So we obtain liberation through fasting. And in this month of Allah, if you have makeup days, start making them. Because we are only about 80 days from Ramadan. Fasting is a means of liberation from the chains of the self-ego. And this tied into Bilal's khutbah on Friday, of which I am so grateful to Allah. I will not say I am proud, because that would be about my ego. But I am so grateful to Allah that He put in my son's heart what He did. And now he teaches me. He's going to teach me now. No pressure. So by abstaining from food, drink, and desires, we are reminded that we are not slaves to these things. But we are all slaves. Now, who are you a slave and what are you a slave to?
Allah and the teachings and following.
That's what we're supposed to be, right? But how many times are we a slave to a personal desire, an ego desire? How many times are we a slave to that boss that we are afraid of more than we are afraid of Allah? The conscious denial of the self refocuses our attention on the greater reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, love, and provision. Fasting also teaches us discipline and gratitude. And it's very sad. When I grew up and I was training to be a Christian minister, there was a lot of focus on you must be disciplined as a minister. Today, mostly when we hear the word discipline, it usually is in regards to how you handle your children. There's very little talk in the world today anymore about self-discipline. Discipline yourself to get up. Discipline yourself to have a place in your home where you worship, and that's your spot. When we feel hungry, we are reminded of those less fortunate and inspired to give. When we abstain, we realize the countless blessings we often take for granted. And then there's the eternal perspective. When unchecked, our desires can lead us away from Allah. They are like a fire that consumes the soul, leaving it restless, anxious, and empty. And I so well remember I had this vision when I got to South Africa. I'm going to have a house as high up on the mountain as you can legally build, and every room is going to see the ocean. And I was in a little bachelor flat, a little bachelor apartment when I had this big dream. When I realized that dream, it meant nothing to me. I was not happy. Through acts of worship, we extinguish this fire of desire, leaving it restless. But when we extinguish the fire, what can we find? We can reignite the light of Allah's guidance within us. Because all of those desires become shields in front of our heart before and between us and Allah. And that's all we can see is what I want, my ego wants. Allah Azza wa Jal, in His mercy, has given us a roadmap. Fasting, prayer, and acts of worship. We often find people reading all these books on the road to success. But the road to success from those books has to do with how much you have in your bank account, not how you are with Allah. These are not burdens. Prayer and worship, fasting are not burdens, but they are opportunities to reconnect with our purpose. Allah created us, men and jinn, for naught except to worship Him. So these are not burdens, but opportunities to reconnect with our purpose and rediscover the peace that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can provide. These are very practical steps toward spiritual growth. One is to interrupt the mundane. If you think back about it, and I remember hearing Sister Julie remind me that it was 6 years ago, I think, that she did her Shahada tonight. The things that used to be considered mundane, they're different now, aren't they, sister? Use prayer and fasting as moments to break free from worldly distractions and recalibrate your fitra. Recalibrate your focus on Allah. Number 2, reflect and purify. Identify the spiritual ailments in your heart, whether it's greed, arrogance, or pride, and work on annihilating them. Work on purifying yourself from them. So reflect and purify. Reconnect, number 3, with the divine. Remember that true happiness and fulfillment comes not from indulging the self, but from surrendering the self, the ego, to whose will? Allah Azza wa Jal. Number 4, embrace the spiritual reality. We are so often caught up in the world that we really aren't embracing the spiritual reality. We're just giving mental assent to it. That's why so many people are saying, well, I'm a Muslim. But did you know that the majority of Muslims show up at the minority of Muslims show up at the masjids on Friday in the world? So embrace this spiritual reality of the month of Allah, the month of Rasulullah, and the month of the community. Recognize that you are more than a physical being and seek to nourish your soul by remembering Allah and acts of worship. And number 5, practice gratitude. Use fasting and prayer as tools to develop gratitude for Allah's countless blessings. And one of the verses in Surah Al-Baqarah, and I'm just coming to me now, one of the mission statements, one of the things that we do in Ramadan is extol our gratitude toward Allah Azza wa Jal. How can you honor Allah and not extol His greatness in the month of Allah? Have you been more grateful? Have you been saying, Shukr Allah? Thank you, Allah, for letting me get to the month of Rajab. Thank you, Allah, and we ask you to let us see the moon of Sha'ban and the moon of Ramadan. Have you been making this dua? Are you excited and pumped up about this opportunity to purify and liberate your soul? Allah's mercy is evident in the opportunities Allah provides for us to connect with Him. Prayer and fasting are not merely rituals. They are lifelines, drawing us back to the source of peace and reminding us of our true purpose. Let us embrace these acts with sincerity, gratitude, and a commitment to go closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, who created us for a greater reality. In Surah 91, verses 7 through 10, by the soul and the proportion and order given to it, how much time I spend developing my soul and it's enlightened to its rights and wrongs. Truly, the one that succeeds is the one that purifies it, and he or she fails that corrupts it. Are you building your soul, or are you corrupting it by sitting around complaining, gossiping, carrying tales, or whatever else other people are doing? I don't have time for that. The last little piece I want to talk about is liberation through fasting. Fasting is a divine tool for liberation, freeing us from the yokes of our nafs, our lower self, and the distractions of the material world. In Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 183, Allah explicitly states the purpose of fasting so that you might remain conscious of Allah. I don't want to make you feel bad, but I do want you to stop for a moment and think about how many moments of this day, how many minutes of this day, how many hours of this day did I go and not even think about my Lord? I didn't say shukran, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. This taqwa, this God consciousness becomes a spiritual shield, protecting us from this destructive forces of arrogance, greed, prejudice, and attachments to fleeting worldly desires. The temporary abstinence or abstention from food, drink, and other physical desires during fasting is not an act of deprivation, but an exercise in elevation. What a tragedy. What a travesty if someone believes that they are being deprived in the month of Allah or in the month of Ramadan. It reorients, it reboots us from being enslaved to our passions and addictions, emphasizing that true freedom lies in servitude and surrender to Allah alone. Fasting is also a school of compassion. The hunger and thirst we voluntarily endure during fasting opens the doors to empathy and compassion. How many of you have had those hunger pains in Ramadan and you saw some homeless person and you were more moved to feed them in Ramadan than outside of Ramadan? Anybody ever had that experience? Yeah. So it's a school of compassion. When I look around the world, we need a lot of schools of compassion. This spiritual alignment with the suffering of others fosters a deep sense of gratitude and responsibility. Through this alignment, fasting transforms the inner state. What a wonderful interruption. It moves us beyond acknowledging others' struggles to actualize kindness, charity, and solidarity. The month of Ramadan, celebrated as a time of giving, becomes a testament to the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah that you extol Allah for having guided you aright. There is no way that I could ever thank Allah enough for the privilege to be a Muslim. I was lost. I was miserable. I was depressed. I wanted to die. I really wanted to die. And I planned it a few times. How could I ever forget the gift that Allah gave me to call me to this exalted standard? Breaking the addiction of materialism. Our daily routines, often consumed by the material and mundane, risk turning us into prisoners of our desires and compulsions. Prayer and fasting are divinely ordained interruptions that recalibrate our focus. By abstaining from food and drink, we are reminded of our dependence on Allah, on the transient sources of sustenance. The Quran, revealed during Ramadan, underscores this by guiding us to discern between the true and the false, and we know that truth will always prevail over falsehood. Falsehood will perish. As you eloquently realize that our spiritual dimension cannot be nourished by physical means alone. The fasting body is weakened, but the fasting soul is strengthened. It is through this discipline that we cultivate the qualities Allah Azza wa Jal has imbued within us: generosity, humility, patience, and gratitude. So Ramadan is a celebration of the inner self. It's not a celebration of feasting, but a celebration of fasting. And isn't it strange that we say that, but most people gain weight in Ramadan? How can that be? How can it be that I'm eating one meal instead of 3, and I come out 30 days later weighing 10 or 15 pounds more? It's because I indulged my nafs and my desires, and I ate physical food instead of spiritual food. How many times will you go to a masjid and you have an opportunity to hear the kalam of God, the speech of God, and people are standing outside smoking? Now, I don't mean to, my intention is not to judge those people, but it's to point out what interruption they're missing. This amazing divine interruption, and they're wasting it away. The unfortunate cultural tendency to indulge in elaborate meals during this sacred month distracts from its essence. True celebration lies in the restraint that leads to spiritual fulfillment and in the communal bonds through acts of charity and shared prayers. Fasting, when performed with intention and consciousness, is a means to polish the soul. To a happy state shall indeed attain he or she who causes the self to grow in purity, and truly lost is he or she who buries it in darkness. So Ramadan therefore becomes a month-long opportunity to purify our hearts, shed the darkness of our inner ailments, and draw closer to Allah. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Transcendent are you, O Allah, and praise be to you as you praise yourself. I bear witness to the fact that there is no deity except you. I seek your forgiveness and I repent to you. So I just have a few announcements, and then I want to talk about the breakout. And tonight I'm not going to do the numbers thing. You get to choose who you'd like. 3 groups of 5 or we have 20, right? Well, just try to make it so that we have even groups, and I'm thinking we need 4 groups out of this group. 4 or 5. 4 groups of 5 maybe? Yeah, that'll work. Something, 19? Okay, so we can have 3 groups of 5 and 1 of 4. Or you can do 1 7 and 2 6s. Whatever you want to do, I don't really care. There's an area there. There's a area outside around the pit. You can light that pit if you'd like, if anybody would like to light the fire out there. And there's a place here and there's a place here. So let's go over what we're going to do tonight. Okay. The objectives of this session: deepen understanding of the spiritual dimension of fasting and worship during Rajab, Sha'aban, and Ramadan. Explore the transformative power of intentional interruptions to daily routines. Develop practical strategies for incorporating spiritual growth into daily life. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give a little opening statement, and then we're going to have a small group activity of about 20 minutes. So here's the prompt. Life is often a cycle of routines and worldly attachments. How do interruptions like salah and fasting remind us of our greatest purpose? I want you to reflect on that silently just for a moment. You're going to break into groups, but I just want you to reflect on that silently for a moment. Let me do it again. Life is often a cycle of routines and worldly attachments. How do interruptions like Salah and fasting remind us of our greater purpose? Anybody want to share an initial thought? Yes, Camila.
I get to quiet my mind and my surroundings and put my head on the ground and just feel my connection to Allah.
Bilal.
I feel when I pray, it's an ascension to Allah. When you're able to think of it in that way, that you're ascending to Allah a couple times a day, I feel like it makes you that much closer to Allah.
Anybody else? Anything come up for you? Go ahead, and then we'll just go around.
First time in my life that I realized that my daily job, which required to be a provider, requires a lot of attention and focus what I'm doing. And I find it's a lot of the break that I never thought I'm going to have from all that noise around. That focus on the trade that you're trying to do and to get as best as you can. And the connection that you have is the surroundings that, hey, you got to earn the buck to bring the bread on the table. But I find really that 5 minutes or even 10 minutes just from all that noise is a blessing.
And somebody else? Yes, please. Please.
This is like a new thing for me. It just makes me sad that it took me so long to get here, but I'm so grateful to be here. But when I'm bowing, I feel the most like myself. Like it's such a peaceful feeling, and I look forward to it. Like I'm like eager to pray, which I think back as like a kid or a teenager, like you're just trying to avoid prayer, But so it's amazing to be here. But when I'm in like the position of bowing, I can almost feel every muscle in my body relax. If you hit that position right, and it's just, there's nothing like that feeling. I don't even know, I'm sure you all have felt that at some point, but there's no words other than like, oh, this is who I am. Like it's a remembering of who I am.
Thank you. Mason,
I've found that if I schedule my prayers around my day, it helps me to stop and just kind of connect along the way, because there's always going to be something else that I need to do, and then as soon as I get this, I'll do that. As soon as I do this, then I'll do that. And then I notice like I'm barely making the prayer on time, whereas if I shift the focus and really, I feel like I've accomplished more when I do my prayers on time than I've actually completed any specific task or several tasks at hand. So I find stopping to pray helps me stay connected, really connected to what's more important, because it's that cycle in my head that without Allah, you wouldn't have what you have today. So if you don't thank Him for 5 minutes, 5 times a day, then it's going to keep you from getting more of what you actually need or want. So that's what keeps me on that.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Every morning or the night before, I plan my day. And Naran strives to schedule my clients around the prayers. So most therapists, it's a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 50-minute session. You got 10 minutes, use the bathroom and get back. So she gives me usually a 15 to 25 minute so that I can pray. And when she doesn't, when there's a mistake made, I find that worldly interruption so offensive. I find the fact that I'm worried that I'm going to get that prayer on time. So I actually set timers for every prayer. It's in red. So everything in black is what I have to do worldly, and the red is the priority, and that's when I'm going to pray that day. So if my client finishes at 2:50 and the prayer came in at 2:25, at 2:50 I'm going to pray that prayer. And I actually set alarms. I don't usually set alarms for my clients, but for prayers I do. And I will actually tell the client, if they're Muslim now, we're going to finish today at 2:50 because I got to get my prayer in. And some of the non-Muslim clients, they know I've got to finish. I can't go over today, because I have a tendency to let people manipulate me and go over the 50 minutes.
Ram,
Yes. No, they're not rambling. It's good stuff, but I don't always take care of myself, my soul. And so I try to stick to that when it's a prayer time, though. So, there are some, oh, I'm sorry. Who? Oh, yes, please, Julie. I'm sorry. I didn't see you.
And thank you for seeing me, but I thought I got away with not having to say it. And this is a little personal. I find that being able to come to prayer or say vicar, I struggle with depression and I struggle with fear. And they have no place when my heart's pounding and I'm having an anxiety attack and I start saying vicar, it just disappears. So for me, I feels like it's saving me. I have a really bad nightmare and I can roll over and I can say vicar. And some people might not be able, I used to not be able to sleep. Like I had like insomnia, horrible, because of my nightmares. But now all I have to do is if I say vicar as I'm going to sleep, I don't have those kind of dreams. It's free, like you said, it's freeing. Everybody's freeing moment may be a different kind of freeing. For me, it takes my fear and pain away.
Thank you for sharing that. That's okay. Leigh?
I was just going to say that with what we're talking about with prayer, and Sister Afifa, what you were sharing about prostration, prostration is Allah's favorite position. SubhanAllah. And I know, I have a feeling, so the non-Muslims, when they see it, it looks different. But for us to submit and surrender to Allah, it must just be so rewarding. And I did see this weird scientific study that they saw about how over time there's a part of the brain that kind of wears off and is responsible for conscientiousness, taqwa. And if we're praying, we're letting that blood flow just sit longer. The gravity push through, it's higher developed in people that do prostration.
Yeah. Actually, what happens is if you do it on the earth, the free radicals are actually being pulled out of your body as yours going into sujood. And also from a spiritual standpoint, your heart is above your head, which means the heart's dominating the ego. The heart's telling you subconsciously that this heart is far superior to that brain, that you think you're so smart and you think you're all this and that in a bag of chips. This heart's what you need to be focused on, and that's what's elevated in that prayer when you go into sujood. So, anybody else on that answer? Yes.
I talked about this praying in the car, and then because at work, if I don't find a place, then I go to my car and I pray in my car. And the difference of actually doing that motion and when you're actually praying with your head on the ground, it feels so different. So I just feel incomplete when I'm doing my prayer in the car. So, yeah.
I really relate to that. If I'm pushed, I'm going to make it instead of not making it. But I do not get that beautiful interruption that I get when I go into sujood. And with my health conditions, I pretty much only go into sujood in the masjid because I just want to. I live to be in that position. But if I did it 5 times a day and the other times that I pray, I probably would not be able to walk because of the chronic arthritis in my back. But I long to be there. So, anybody else before we go into groups? I was going to give a separate topic for each group. Each group will get a handout so you can look at it. And these are the topics. Interruptions that liberate. Discuss how fasting and prayer break the monotony of daily life. Share personal experiences of challenges in maintaining focus on Allah amidst worldly distractions. Number 2, purifying the heart. Reflect on the spiritual ailments mentioned. Greed, pride. How can acts of worship, fasting, and gratitude help in addressing these? Number 3, nourishing the soul. Discuss the balance between material and spiritual needs. How can we ensure the soul is fed adequately in our modern materialistic world? Number 4, empathy through fasting. Share thoughts on how fasting cultivates empathy and gratitude What practical steps can we take to embody compassion and serve others? And number 5 is community and unity and worship. Reflect on the communal aspects of Ramadan, such as breaking fast together, praying in congregation, and giving charity. How can we extend these values beyond Ramadan? Each group will have a note taker. I'll go get pads in just a moment to summarize your key points. Ensure that everyone, whoever the leader becomes, ensure that every single person participates in reflection. We'll give you like 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and take about 10 minutes for everybody to share what they learned. And then we'll have all of these material, worldly desserts that will feed our physical body poison. I mean sugar. I did not mean to say that, of course. Yes, I'm lying. I did mean to say that. So anyway, I have these, and then I'm going to get homework for you tonight as well. This is the first time, but I'm giving you homework because I wrote a little, and I will make copies for everyone if I didn't make enough. Originally we had 10 people, so I think I made 10 copies. I'll go in the office and make 10 more. But this is the power of interruptions. I put a hadith and a verse from the Quran on here, and I'm going to want you to read this and follow the instructions on this, but this will be for home. And
Talk about it next Sunday when we have class.
yes, we will talk about it next Sunday, how many people did their homework. And don't say the dog, well, no, most of you probably don't have dogs, but the cat ate it or something like that. All right, so let's